Friday Night Lights is back in Charlottesville. Virginia football is set to host number 8 Florida State in a big ACC matchup. Coming up in the Good Old Podcast, we break down the keys to the game. We also take a look at the injuries for both sides, including if center Brady Wilson is expected to play for UVA. We bring on Chris Nee from Noles 24/7 to help preview the game, and we discuss recruiting. How did that big recruiting weekend do for Virginia last weekend? All that coming up on the Good Old Podcast.
This is why you play college football, to play in games like this. I told the guys this week, I asked them how many of them want to play pro ball, and everybody raised their hand. I said, well, this is the closest thing you're going to get to it at this level. Well, when you're playing a team like Florida State, it's pro ball, and it's a game of inches, and you got to win in tight spaces. So I think the guys are excited, and then this is also an opportunity for us to kind of see where we're at, like how much progress have we really made with when you're going against a team like Florida State.
Well, you heard Virginia head coach Tony Elliott. This is going to be a big game for Virginia. Hi, and welcome back to the Good Old Podcast. I'm Jacquie Franciulli for Wahoo's 24/7. And it is a big week for UVA. The Cavaliers will host number 8 Florida State on Friday night. And it just happens to be the 30th anniversary of the 1995 UVA team to knock off the then undefeated ACC play Florida State. Florida State was coming into that game 29-0 before Virginia beat them. That was the first ACC loss for the Noles. So a lot of history playing on that field as well. It's also the throwback jerseys that Virginia will don against the Noles on Friday night. Some of the players are very excited to that fact. Now, on this episode, we're going to break down the game. We're going to talk a little bit about that Stanford win as well. And just briefly, we'll discuss a little bit recruiting. But before we get going, why don't you go ahead and like this video and click on the bell so that you're notified whenever the new video is uploaded. And go ahead and head to wherever you listen to your podcast and leave us a 5-star review. And if you like more extensive coverage of Virginia, either recruiting, football, or basketball, head over to wahoos247.com so that you can have a lot of the coverage from press conference, from interviews, from features, and some of the taking a look at the numbers and a couple other stuff that we have there on Wahoo's 24/7. So before we get going, let's break down the big headlines coming into this matchup. A lot of injuries to report on both sides, actually. Let's start with Virginia. Virginia center Brady Wilson was listed as day-to-day by Virginia head coach Tony Elliott after the game against Stanford. When Wilson left the game early in the third quarter with an apparent calf injury, Elliott said that he was hopeful that it was only a calf strain. Elliott said once again on Tuesday that is still the belief, and they still think it is day to day. So Virginia does not have an answer if he will be playing against Florida State on Friday night. Now, if it's a calf strain, if it's a mild calf strain, it could be anywhere between 1 to 3 week recovery. So that is something to monitor as we look forward to the game against the Noles. Another guy that is day to day is another offensive lineman, Ethan Sipe. Ethan Sipe was not available for the Cavaliers in the game against Stanford, and he continues to be the one to monitor as we look forward to Florida State. Daniel Sparks is also day to day. The punter hurt his hip flexor against William and Mary, so he was out against Stanford. He only did holding duties, and that is the expectation moving to Florida State, that he's day to day, but he is more than likely just going to have holding duties once again. So that is something that is also worth watching. The good news is Virginia's safety Antonio Clary received some snaps against Stanford earlier last week. He was there for a series. Virginia has been very cautious and very slow in putting him back there in game day action. He had about 6 snaps against Stanford. Elliott said that he expects to give him a little bit more snaps against Florida State. So that is certainly good news for Virginia's secondary, who's had some issues this season. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit on the podcast. As far as Florida State, 2 of the players on the offensive side of the ball that were missing the last 2 games are back. Wide receiver Squirrel White is expected to return for the Noles, and tight end Randy Pittman is also expected to return. So those are the big headlines as far as injuries and personnel as we prepare for Virginia's matchup against Florida State. Now let's move on. Before we go into more details on FSU, let's go back to the game against Stanford. UVA dominated Stanford from start to finish. It was a game that Virginia controlled. It's also another game where Virginia was able to rest Chandler Morris, so Daniel Kellen getting some reps there in the fourth quarter. So obviously good news for UVA whenever you get to do that, and getting some guys extra game day experience reps is always great for UVA. Let's start with what was some of our takeaways in the game. Chandler Morris. He is certainly one that has shown a lot the last 4 games for Virginia. I think this was his best game in the Virginia uniform. He had the best QB rating in the ACC, 4th best nationally. He was able to show such poise inside the pocket. He's be able to move the pocket. He was able to handle the pressure really well. When he was pressured, he didn't just throw the ball in the air or go to the sideline and take a sack. What he did was he looked around. He knew where his playmakers were going to be. He rolled backwards, then kept his eyes downfield, which was key, and was able to still find his guy or make the run. I mean, one of the ones that I highlighted in our 1st and 10 series was his completion to Sage Ennis. That was a great throw because he was able to keep an eye on where he expected his players to go, and he still kept his eye downfield and kept making his reads. That is definitely something that shows maturity and just confidence in the offense. So that is certainly something that has helped this offense. And even sometimes when the offensive line might not have been able to protect the pocket, Chandler Morris was able to get out of that pressure. So that's why Virginia's offense has only yielded 1 sack so far. It's kind of a little bit of both the offensive line play, but also Chandler Morris's ability. And then the other thing that you can notice from the last 4 games, in particular the game against Stanford, is just a balanced offense. I mean, they had another game where they had over 500 yards of total offense, 590 to be exact, 401 of those coming in the first half, 384 in the air, 206 coming on the ground. Again, a balanced offense than we've seen from Virginia during the Tony Elliott era. There's also another game where another player had 3 touchdowns. This time it was Trail Harris, who was able to get 21 points in that first quarter. He's demonstrating what we all knew he was capable of when he got hurt last year. We all said that he was able to stretch the field. He's showing that this season, and he showed that against Stanford. The other thing this game has kind of demonstrated, if you looked at my 1st and 10 series, I also showed that wide receivers are not afraid to block. And I'm talking about Jamal Edgerrin. He's actually the highest graded run blocker for Virginia that is not an offensive lineman, according to Pro Football Focus. If you look back at the 1st and 10, I showed one that unfortunately that touchdown by Jamar Taylor got called back because of a holding call. But if you look closely, you see Jamal Edgerrin absolutely mauling a defensive back. And he's been very committed to the run game as far as a blocker. He's been a willing blocker and has really shown why Virginia has improved so much in the run game. Now, defensively, I mean, it was a good game defensively. Daniel Rickard was explosive. I mean, he's shown why John Rudzinski calls him the best football player that they have. They were able to get the most sacks since last year against Wake Forest on the road. They were able to get the pressure up front, and that's been a huge improvement for Virginia. Like Jason Hammond and Hunter Osborne had 5 and 4 tackles respectively, and that showed how much they were getting after it and being aggressive up front. All positive things for UVA. Positive also that Cam Robinson was back and led the team in tackles. All great points for Virginia. I mean, when you have the run defense that was such a sieve against NC State, only allowing less than 100 yards rushing on Saturday. All great improvements for that side of the ball. Now, actually, before I get going to the secondary, I want to point out that one thing that I did like about this defense is all the twists and stunting that was done in the defensive line. A lot of moving pieces. Kazim Moore moved around a little bit. I also like that they moved Caleb Hardy a bit. He was playing more of the nickel position just because he's a bigger body. He also played nickel. He obviously played in the box. He was twisting the edge. So I really liked how they used Caleb Hardy in that matchup as well. But I can't talk about the defense without talking about the secondary, which has been kind of like a theme that this year has kind of shown, because against Stanford, they allowed a 68-yard touchdown and a 60-yard gain, 2 big plays. And then against William and Mary, they allowed a 79-yard touchdown. Bad eyes, miscommunication. That has been the challenge for this secondary. And that's been a question that we had coming into this season. And it's an expected issue. When you have so many new pieces in the secondary, you're going to have some growing pains. And unfortunately for Virginia, not only did they bring so many new pieces, but they also had injuries to those pieces during training camp. So they hardly have played together. I mean, Christian Charles came back the last week of training camp. You had Donovan Plant coming in and out during training camp. Jordan Robinson was out, but I believe it was a sickness during training camp too. And then you had other guys coming back. I mean, Antonio Clary just came back. So you're going to have some secondary issues because you're not having them play together as much. So this is all part of the growing pains. Unfortunately, the growing pains are going to have to continue in a matchup against Florida State, who has had I don't want to say a reputation of creating big plays, but I mean, they have been able to make some explosive plays this season on that Florida State offense. But before we get to breaking down the matchup between these two teams, why don't we hear from John Rudzinski? Because he was asked about the secondary issues.
What you do is you put your players through it, first off, and you try to get an idea as far as all the different looks they can create. There'll be something that we didn't work, so we'll have to do a great job like we do every week as far as communicating, aligning, and then putting our eyes in the right place. Because usually with those big plays, where they're trying to, or gadgets, if you don't have great eye discipline, you can make a mistake.
Coach Elliott said something about trying to read too much with their eyes in the secondary. How do you get them to, I don't know, see the big picture, but also like not overdo it?
Yeah, I think you put your eyes on your man, and usually it's pretty simple as far as, hey, if I got to see through one, I see through one, and we just got to continue. You know what? You just look at fundamentally as far as we as coaches got to put them through. Some of those probably more of those deep ball scenarios where that ball's 50, 60 yards in the air. And then the other piece is just continuing to rep. And the more and more that guys get reps, within any defensive system, the more and more comfortable they get.
And like I said, I mean, Florida State's going to test the secondary. Just to kind of break this down, Florida State this year has had 16 plays of 30 yards or more, 12 plays of 40 yards or more, or 7 plays of 50 yards or more. They also have 5 players with 100 yards or more of rushing. So this is an explosive team. Gus Malzahn has come over there and has made this offense click with the help of Tommy Castellanos. Castellanos is someone that Virginia fans should know very well. I mean, he came to Scott Stadium last year, didn't have quite the success that he wanted. He threw 2 picks and was sacked 3 times. So Virginia's hoping for more of that, Tommy Castellanos, when it comes to this matchup on Friday night. FSU's has a number one total offense. Obviously, Malzahn is going to test the DB. Now, they are more of a run-heavy offense. So I think the danger that Virginia is going to have against Florida State is if you load up the box, load up the box, push them, and that you're hoping to stop them in the run game, you're going to open yourself up. You're going to put those corners on an island. And do you trust your DBs right now to be placed on an island? And that's the question that John Rudzinski and that defense is going to ask of themselves. Now, the other side of the ball, Des Kitching said, this is the best defensive front that we have faced. Des Kitchings loves coaching this offense. I mean, give the man all the credit, give him all the rewards, all the flowers. He has done a great job working with the playmakers that he has and working with the pieces in the right positions. So I think he's been having a lot of fun. And he mentioned that this week when we spoke to him. He said Florida State is going to be a very, very challenging opponent, but he's having fun seeing what this offense can do.
Fun because this is a great group. They love each other, as a team, as coach to player. It sounds kind of, cliche-ish, but like they really love each other. You can see that as we go out and play, right? The passion they have for trying to perform at a high level, right? Their eagerness to want to get things corrected, their attention to detail and the game plan and, the ownership and trying to go out and put forth a great performance. And so that's been really fun. And, some interesting personalities here, which is good, right? To make fun of me, which is great. And keep playing well. You can make all the fun of me you want to make, with that. But it's all been good. And I think that's really a testament to just the character of the guys we have, not only on offense, but on the team and just in the whole program. When you've assembled and brought together a group of guys like that, and for them to mesh as well as they have mesh, right, for a common goal to, to go win, right, and to try to compete for an opportunity to get to Charlotte. And this would be one of those games where we kind of see where we stack up, because they're really good,
Virginia's defense will need to stop the run, but Virginia's offense will need to run the ball. Now, the big battle, the defense obviously is going to have a very important role here for Virginia. But when you look at this game, you have UVA that leads in first down offense facing off against Florida State, who leads in first down defense. UVA leads in time of possession in the ACC. The issue that you have when you face a team like Florida State is you might want to be a little bit more aggressive. You might want to be quicker. You might want to do a lot more with your offense. What Des Kitchings, what Chandler Morris, what all Sage Ennis, what all of them agree is that they got to play their own offense. The key is red zone. Right now, they've only scored a touchdown in 57% of their red zone trips so far this year. They need to do better. When you're facing a team like Florida State that can make explosive plays, score quickly, you're going to have to take your possessions and make them count. You have to be efficient in the red zone. You need to take those 7 points because you don't know how long it's going to take for you to get there. You can't come from behind. So Florida State is going to try to put Virginia on their back heels, because they're going to try to make Virginia play a little bit quicker than they are. I mean, right now, Virginia is holding steady. They're holding long drives, and that's what's been securing them their wins and almost secured them win against NC State. So that is the key for them. Obviously, ball security, protecting Chandler Morris with the whole issue of the offensive line, with Brady Wilson possibly not coming in. You're going to have Drake Metcalf coming in at center. Your right guard's going to be either Kevin Wigginton or Tyshawn Wyatt. Wigginton, I know, had a rough start against Stanford, but he also was probable on the injury list, and he wasn't expected to play. He was still dealing with an injury, but he came in because it was an emergency situation, and Tyshawn Wyatt is still recovering from his knee injury, so he's also working back to health. The key is these guys will be having practice underneath their belt as they move forward this week going into Florida State. So those are some key issues there for the offense. Keep Chandler Morris healthy and upright, and also make sure that when you get to the red zone, make it count against this Florida State defense, because you know that the Florida State offense will be able to get points on the board, and you don't want to be in a shootout per se against this team. So those are kind of the big talking points coming in from this game moving forward here. And I can tell you a little bit about Florida State, but I know Chris Nee over at Noles 24/7 can tell you a lot about Florida State and what to expect for them and what the key matchups and what the key personnels look like. So we're going to take a quick break. And then on the other side, Chris will join us on the show so we can talk a little bit about Florida State. And welcome back to the Good Old Podcast. As you can see, Chris Nee from Noles 24/7 has joined us on the show. Chris, thank you so much for joining us to talk a little bit about this big game on Friday night.
Sure thing.
And is FSU kind of aware of how big this game is for UVA, just because of not just obviously having a ranked team for the first time in a few years in Scott Stadium, but for Virginia, it's the 30th anniversary of a pretty big game in 1995 against both of these teams.
Yeah. Work done was very close to being in. Some people would even argue he got in, but yeah, he was not called in. So
yeah, there's a lot of anticipation for this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think for FSU, this game's kind of big. It's funny going into the season. I think the expectation for FSU from the local beat was lower than what it now is because of what they did to Alabama, how they played through 3. But this game was always sort of a crucial, important one because back then it was the point of, can this team win 8 or 9? And now it's more so, can this team handle their business, beat a team who they're viewed as better as, and set themselves up, obviously, for what's ahead. And, what's looming in the future for FSU is a top 10 showdown with Miami a week after. So,
And actually, that's how I want to start because the expectation around FSU heading into the season is very different, like you said. Honestly, a lot of people didn't know what to expect from this FSU team because of what happened last year with the influx of transfer talent last year. How are they going to handle another influx of talent this year? Just watching them, what is different about this year? Why are things clicking this year?
to what is different is pretty much everything. It's kind of mind blowing to cover a 2-10 program that was as utterly disappointing as humanly possible a season ago, and now be covering one that's 3-0 and you feel like has the potential to really make some noise in the ACC and potentially in the national picture. I think the biggest difference is it's kind of all changed. Mike Norvell has always been a play caller in his time at FSU. He backed off that and went and hired Gus Malzahn. Norvell and Malzahn, for those unfamiliar, worked together at Tulsa. They'd known each other for a couple decades. They're very close. A lot of similar ideology with offensive play calling, but there's some nuance and difference to everything they do. Gus is obviously extremely well versed in calling the offensive side of the ball. Malzahn is also extremely happy not to be a head coach. He is a older gentleman who did not enjoy everything that comes with being a head coach in today's day and age of college football. And then defensively, they went and hired Tony White, which was a vast departure from what they did with Adam Fuller, who's now with the Los Angeles Chargers as their defensive coordinator. Tony White is a guy who runs a 3-3-5, but it's not always a 3-3-5. They'll have 4 men up at the line at times and make a lot of different looks. But it's just from a mentality standpoint, an approach standpoint, what they do, it's vastly different than what FSU had done defensively in the Mike Norvell era. They're much more aggressive. Uh, Creating turnovers is sort of a focal point. It hasn't yet happened at an extremely high rate. They've generated some interceptions, but not to the point they want to be at. And then the roster flipped. It's 56% new players. A great deal of transfer portal talent imported, also some freshmen who have made an impact. With the portal, it's interesting year over year. In 24, they loved their portal class going into that season. It failed miserably. It never clicked. It didn't work well. They missed that quarterback. The offense was an utter failure. Their O-line was absolutely miserable. Fast forward a year, Luke Pettibon, who, Virginia fans are probably familiar with from his Wake Forest days as their center. I think he's a crucial piece to the puzzle offensively. Tommy Castellanos is sort of tailor-made for what the Gus Malzahn offense is. And then they've just added explosive talent. And Gus Malzahn's offense, you're going to be explosive. FSU is arguably the most explosive team in the country, given that it's padded somewhat by some of the competition they played outside of Alabama. And then defensively, sort of flipped the script on the defensive line, hired Terrence Knighton, who has worked with Tony White before. Knighton played in the NFL, nicknamed Pot Rose, played for the Jaguars back in the day. That's really helped that D-line come together. And then the secondary, they went from being kind of an aggressive, sometimes press man type of scheme to more zone-oriented, and bringing in Jeremiah Wilson, who now goes by Jerry Wilson at cornerback. He's been a pretty big piece to the puzzle to get right on that side of the ball. And then Earl Little, who's a returning player for FSU, who had a very miserable first 6 games of last year, kind of figured out in the back end. He's been very, very good for them. He's arguably been one of the best players wearing a garnet and gold uniform. So much has changed. The confidence level is much better. The culture feels like it's back on track. It feels like a team that likes each other, plays hard for each other, and the scheme and the way the guys are fitting into said schemes, it's gone very well through 3 games.
Yeah, Tony Elliott actually joked during his press conference on Tuesday that it's going to be interesting going up against Gus Malzahn's offense because some of his offensive principles came from Gus and Chad during his days in his high school coaching. So he kind of picked up some things. So he said it's going to be fun going up against him. And a part of the offensive success, I mean, Florida State leads in several offensive categories in the ACC conference this year, has been the success of the marriage between Gus Malzahn and Tommy Castellanos. Virginia fans are very familiar with Castellanos from his time period in Boston College. Castellanos came over to Scott Stadium last year. It was probably a game that he wants to forget. Actually, if he in that situation, he had a few interceptions in that game, but he is a different quarterback in this system. It feels like they found a good repertoire between both of them, and it's been very successful.
Yeah, so, entering the season with Tommy, I had the belief that he sorta is what he is. He's played a lot of college football. I think he had thrown 530 or so passes in his collegiate career when he got to FSU. So you sort of knew what to expect, which was some peaks, some valleys, obviously a great athlete, and the throwing was sort of inconsistent. So far for FSU, he's been excellent as a passer. His big time throw rate, best in the country. They've been very good at pushing it down the field. He's been ultra efficient. He did get picked one last week, but I think if you watch that pick, it's sort of a hat tip to the defender. They just did a phenomenal job. It wasn't really a bad decision or a bad throw. It was an excellent defensive play. Um, so it's interesting to see, does he maintain that consistency in what he has done in an FSU uniform, or does he return a little bit more to the mean, to the norm, to what we expect of him based on his collegiate career? I am interested in that. Virginia's probably, outside of Alabama, the one that can challenge him the most in that regard. The thing that's been great for Tommy and this offense in general is they're run first. Gus Malzahn is always going to set everything up with a run. He wants to be physical downhill, but he's also going to stretch you and work to the edges and be ultra aggressive with athleticism. And I think that has allowed Tommy's done some of that with his legs, but the supporting cast to him has done a phenomenal job of putting him at ease and creating opportunities when they do take shots, that they have favorable situations, that they have one-on-ones they can win. And they have the talent at receiver, at tight end with a guy like Randy Pittman that can go win one-on-ones. So I think it will be interesting to see, there's 3 games of film now on FSU, Gus Malzahn, Tommy Castellano is what they're doing. How does Virginia counter that, and how does FSU react to said counter? And that to me is sort of the storyline, is what FSU's offense is going to be able to do. I do expect them to be explosive. I think from an athleticism standpoint, FSU's offense has capable personnel that will challenge some of the pieces of the Virginia defense, and that FSU needs to go out and beat that. Like, they need to dictate terms from the get-go in Scott Stadium, because it's a Friday night. 61,000 or so is what Scott fits, I believe. It's going to be rabid, and you want to take that crowd out. You want to take that soft factor away and make it be all about what is on the football field. But I am interested to see how Tommy and everybody handles that. But in this day and age, as you know, someone covering Virginia who has, I feel like every other player on your depth chart is a graduate. It's a lot of old guys. Like, they've been in these moments. It's not as much as the old days where it was like, oh, they're rolling out 4 or 5 freshmen or first-year players, and this is the first time on the road. There's just not much of that anymore. So I do think that factor has been sort of alleviated.
Yeah, I mean, I've never covered so many 20-year-olds in the college game that I do now. I mean, guys are married or engaged. They're going to the next state of their life. I mean, Virginia has 2 married guys, one in the offensive line, one in the defensive line. So it's definitely a different college football right now. And actually, a few few Virginia players, Florida State fans know well on that defense and offense. I mean, if you look, Sage Ennis is from the area right near Tallahassee. You have Antonio Clary, who's from the Jacksonville area. You have a lot of connections there. So a lot of these players, Jason Hammond, who's from St. Thomas Aquinas down in South Florida. So you have a lot of those connections there. And it feels like that energy is also there among them. But I want to kind of focus on the offense for one more question, because I think the biggest question for me when it comes to Virginia, when I'm looking at this matchup, is the secondary for UVA, who has been exploited a few times on explosive plays. And then when I look at Florida State's rosters, I see speed. And speed has been an issue for Virginia. I mean, their run defense was an issue against NC State, but they also didn't have linebacker Cam Robinson. Robinson just started playing the last 2 games. His first game back was against Stanford, and he warmed up previously against William Mary, so he just started to return. So I can kind of forgive the run defense when your best overall defensive player was not playing in that game against NC State. But that secondary has been a consistent issue, and in the last few games, they let think 3 plays over 60 yards or more, and they let wide receivers go behind the safety. So that is my main matchup for the defense. Yes, you could talk about stopping the run, because you have to do that. That's kind of the big thing in college football. But if you can't stop those big plays when you're pressing forward, that is a bigger issue for Virginia.
Yeah, and FSU is going to take those shots with a guy like Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White, who will be back for this game. Micah D'Anzi, who's a 400-meter champion in the ACC in track and field. He's averaging about 32, 33 per touch, both in run and pass game this year. Those are guys that FSU is going to challenge a team vertically with, and they're going to set up shots. Like, they want to be physical and run, and they want to stretch it and run, but they are going to set up passing shots, and they're going to very much work towards either between the seams or fading right.
And then when you go on the other side for Florida State, I mean, they can stop the run. I mean, they've been very effective this season against Alabama, who's I feel like we should kind of focus a little bit, because they've done it, was what, less than 100 yards for Alabama the first game?
I think Bama had 52, 58, something like that on the first drive, and then they only had about 37 yards the rest of the game on the ground.
So Virginia wants to run the ball. They need to run the ball in order to open things up for Chandler Morris, who's been a steady force there for Virginia. But the big question for me is with Brady Wilson, their center, that has been such a big impact for them. If he's day to day and the O line is banged up on the right side, the big question is, can they handle that defensive front for Florida State? And who are some of the names that you would say are crucial for Virginia? What matchups there?
I mean, Daryl Jackson Jr. is one that everything sort of plays off of. He's not a stat grabber, but he demands a great deal of attention. You watch Bama film, they'll throw 2, sometimes even 3 bodies at him. That obviously is freeing up other people. Daniel Lyons is someone who'll move up and down to Desir Kling, to Sandrell and Daryl Desir. Both have been very good for them. Both are very capable. They're freshmen. They're just making an impact. Mandrell is one who's probably further ahead of those 2 guys that we're talking about. And then, James Williams is a Nebraska transfer that to this point in time hasn't quite been what he was brought in to be, which is really a pass rush specialist who's trying to round in the form of being an every down defensive player. I think this is a pretty crucial game for him. I like watching Chandler Morris on film. I think Chandler is a ultra veteran who understands how to extend the play with subtle movements while keeping his eyes downfield and making good throws. And it's a credit to the young man for how much football he's played and obviously the bloodlines with Chad Morris being his dad and football being life. But, like, this is a game where FSU has to get him down to the ground, and I know he's only been sacked once all year, and I think that's a greater credit to Morris than even the O-line. The O-line played well, but, like, Morris does a great job of getting rid of it quickly and understanding how to create that subtle bit of time he needs to get rid of it. FSU has to step up and get him on the ground. They gotta be aggressive there. I think James Williams is sort of your catalyst guy there. And then the linebacker group's kinda all relatively similar. Justin Cryer, very talented kid. He's improved constantly in the FSU program. Elijah Herring, who's a transfer in, really good player, will get downhill. Stephon Thompson, who's been in this system a bunch because he's been with Tony at 2 other stops, was also at Syracuse, so there might be some familiarity for Virginia with him from there. He's more of their Jack type, as is Omar Graham Jr. All of those guys will factor into what they do up front.
And one of the things for Florida State this week is not looking ahead, right? When you do have that ranked game, big game against in-state rival Miami just 1 week later. Has that been something you've heard around with Norvell and just that's been we got to take it one game at a time? The whole cliche, right? One game at a time and not look forward.
Well, not like, yeah, there's been a degree of there's a lot of respect put on Virginia. That was sort of out of the gate the first time we talked to coordinators on Sunday, first time we talked to Mike on Monday. That's been a consistent thing from all of the coaching staff is Virginia's very capable. They're very good. That offense is good. Tony's got them playing good football. They're competitive. They really had a chance to be undefeated. The pick at the end of the NC State game is the only reason they're not an undefeated team. They had put themselves in position to win that game. So, like, I think the respect is hearty. And again, I think it's a veteran group that sort of understands that, like, you're stepping into what is a prototypical trap game. It's Friday night on the road, week before top 10 matchup. You're allowed to look ahead. I don't think that's happening as much. I think there's enough veteran leadership with guys like Castellanos, plenty of O linemen starting with Luke Pettibon, Jerry Wilson in the secondary, Daryl Jackson, who's been in the college game now a pretty long time. You got guys at all levels that sort of understand, like, it's about the next opponent, and you got to respect them because if you don't, Jamari Taylor's going to bust a run, or Chandler Morris is going to hit a big pass, or Morris is going to get you with his legs, or if you commit a few turnovers, that flips this game on its head, and it's anybody's game. Like, I think those things are kind of understood.
So my final thing, always got to put you guys on the spot. Your key matchups for Florida State and your prediction for the game.
I think Tommy Castellanos needs to be a good passer in this game. I think it's very important for him to be effective pushing it down the field. I think that's how you challenge and put it to Virginia. I think FSU needs to come out and dictate terms by getting on the scoreboard early and often. I don't think Virginia is a team that's necessarily built to really play from behind, just the way they play offensively, where sometimes it will take a minute. And then defensively, like, it starts with Daryl. He's got to be good up front. He's got to demand that attention. Guys got to get home and make plays. You can't let Chandler Moore sit there because he's excellent at dissecting the field, understanding what's going to open up, connecting on that, and he's willing to be patient within the drive. Virginia will put together lengthy drives if you allow them to. I think FSU wins. I actually think FSU is going to sort of go and try to make a statement here. I think this is a maturity checkpoint for FSU. I think they win. I think they covered a spread pretty heartily. A 35-21 type of game is what I'm sort of expecting. FSU is fully capable of being really good, but they have to go and do it. There's a degree of, you've been a good football team for 3 weeks, but you got to go be it again for the 4th week and set yourself up for what's supposed to be here in Tallahassee next week.
All right. Well, appreciate it, Chris, for joining us on the show and breaking down Florida State. Hope you have a safe trip to Charlottesville.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Have a good one.
Well, thank you so much for Chris for joining us on the show. It's always great to have those guys come in and talk a little bit about the opponents since they know and they cover them on a daily basis. So now I guess it's time for my prediction. Unfortunately, I'm going to agree with Chris. I think this is going to be a Florida State win on Friday night. I think if Brady Wilson was 100% healthy, I might be inclined to go with the upset here, but because of the question marks around Brady Wilson, I am not confident enough to pick UVA. Although this game was my upset watch heading into the season. If you remember, during our preseason predictions, I picked Virginia as a likely winner in this matchup because I felt like this was a great trap game for Florida State with them facing Miami next week. But unfortunately, the way the injuries are on the O-line, I don't feel confident in picking Virginia this week. Now, moving forward, Wahoo's247.com will continue to have pregame coverage and also postgame coverage. We are there at Scott Stadium covering the game. We are in all the games. So we'll have postgame coverage coming up to you on Wahoo's247.com. We also have recruiting coverage. Now, last Saturday was a big recruiting event with several top 24/7 playmakers, a lot of great in-state Virginia players visiting Virginia. One of the best players in the 2028, securing his first visit. He came to Virginia. So we have a lot of those reactions on Wahoo's 24/7. Unfortunately, it's a Friday night game. I don't expect a lot of big recruits for this game, but they will be watching. It is one that it's going to be on the national stage, so if they're coming back from their high school game, I'm sure they'll be paying attention to what UVA is doing. So we're going to have a lot of that coming up on Wahoo's 24/7 as far as recruiting. Basketball is hosting visitors this weekend. We'll be previewing that on Friday morning. So that's expected on Wahoo's 24/7. And we're keeping an eye on some of the members of the Virginia 2026 class as they have a really good season. Several UVA commits are doing well for their high school season. And we're also keeping an eye on wide receiver Josiah Teasley, who picked up 2 ACC offers. The Virginia commit picked up both Wake Forest and NC State offers. He is going to visit Penn State this weekend. So it's something to keep a watchful eye as Virginia continues to recruit him to remain in the 2026 class. So all that is available on Wahoo's247.com. But for right now, I hope you guys have a good rest of your week and enjoy your Friday night.